I still remember the day I decided to leave behind the comforts of my old life and move to Redemption, Georgia. The small-town charm and picturesque landscape had always drawn me in, but it was more than that. I was searching for answers. Answers about the strange occurrences that plagued this town, whispers of an ancient curse, and the eerie feeling that something was watching me from the shadows. As a seeker of truth, I've spent years researching the history of redemption, poring over dusty tomes and crumbling records in the local archives. The more I learned, the more I became convinced that there was something sinister lurking beneath the town's idyllic surface. It started with small things, a child's laughter echoing through the streets at night, the sound of footsteps on the old railroad tracks, or the faint scent of salt water carried on the wind. At first, I dismissed it as mere imagination, but as time went on, these occurrences grew more frequent and more intense. It was as if the town itself was trying to tell me something, but what? I've been in Redemption for 6 months now, and every day feels like a descent into the unknown. The locals seem friendly enough, but there's an undercurrent of tension, a sense that they're hiding secrets from me. I've tried to strike up conversations, to ask questions, but no one seems willing to talk. It's as if they're waiting for something or someone. And then there's the Walrus. I'm not sure where to begin with the Walrus. I've seen it in my dreams, a towering figure with razor-sharp tusks and eyes that glow like embers. Some say it's an ancient spirit, one that haunts the town and feeds on fear. Others claim it's just a myth, a story told to scare children into behaving. I don't know what to believe, but I do know this: I'm not alone in Redemption. There's something else here, something that watches me from the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. This is my account of the events that have transpired since I arrived in Redemption. It's a story of darkness and despair, of the supernatural and the unknown. But it's also a story of hope that I'll uncover the truth behind the walrus's sinister curse and escape this town alive. It started with a letter slipped under my door one evening while I was out running errands. The envelope was old and worn, the paper yellowed with age. There was no return address, just a single word typed on a plain sheet of paper: Erebus. I didn't know what it meant, but something about the word resonated deep within me. It was as if I'd been waiting for this moment my entire life. I hesitated for a moment before opening the envelope, my heart racing with anticipation. Inside, I found an invitation to a dinner party at an address that seemed to shift and writhe on the page like a living thing. The name Ravenwood Manor was scrawled in bold letters, accompanied by a single phrase: "Join us for a night of revelation." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read the words. There was something unsettling about this invitation, something that didn't quite feel right. And yet, I couldn't help but be drawn to it. It was as if I'd been summoned by some unseen force, one that promised secrets and mysteries beyond anything I could have imagined. I arrived at Ravenwood Manor on a stormy night, the wind howling through the trees like a chorus of restless spirits. The manor itself loomed before me, its turrets and spires reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. I felt a thrill of fear as I stepped out of my car, but it was quickly replaced by curiosity. Who had sent this invitation? And what did they plan to reveal? I pushed open the creaking front door and stepped inside, into a world that seemed to shift and writhe around me like a living thing. I will never forget the feeling that I left behind as I entered Ravenwood Manor. It was as if I'd crossed from one realm into another, leaving my old life behind. And now, I'm not sure which reality I belong in. I spent hours poring over dusty tomes and yellowed manuscripts in the local archives, searching for any mention of the walrus. It was as if I was chasing a ghost, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting close. The more I read, the more I became convinced that the walrus was an ancient entity tied to redemption's history and mythology. According to one text, the walrus was a malevolent being, said to be born from the darkness of the sea itself. It was drawn to towns like Redemption, where the veil between worlds was thin, and it fed on fear and despair. I couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation as I delved deeper into my research. What had I gotten myself into? Was this really worth risking my sanity and my life? But I pushed on, driven by a morbid curiosity that refused to be satisfied. And then I stumbled upon an ancient text that made my blood run cold. It was an incantation, written in a language I didn't understand, but the words seemed to leap off the page at me like a warning. As I read, the air around me began to chill, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see a figure shrouded in shadows, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure didn't move or speak, but I knew it was watching me, studying me. And then, without warning, it vanished into thin air. The encounter left me shaken, but also more determined than ever to uncover the truth about the walrus. I spent the next few nights researching and investigating, following a trail of cryptic clues that led me deeper into the heart of Redemption's mystery. I will never forget the feeling of being watched as I delved deeper into this world. It was as if the very fabric of reality was torn apart, revealing hidden truths and unseen terrors. And yet, I couldn't look away. I had to know more about the walrus, no matter the cost. I had been searching for the dark library of Redemption for weeks, following cryptic clues and rumors that led me deeper into the town's hidden archives. Finally, I found it, a nondescript building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a tangle of overgrown gardens and twisted vines. The sign above the door read, "The Redmondian Archives," but I knew from my research that this was something more than just an ordinary library. It was as if I had stepped into a different world, one where the rules of reality no longer applied. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of decay, and the shelves seemed to stretch on forever, packed tightly with ancient tomes bound in black leather. I began my search, running my fingers over the spines of the books, feeling for any sign of what I was looking for. And then I found it, a tome bound in a strange, scaly material that seemed to shift and writhe in my hand like a living thing. It was an ancient text, written in a language that looked like nothing I had ever seen before. But as I opened the book, the words began to glow with an otherworldly light, and I knew that I was holding something truly special. The text spoke of the walrus, of its true nature and its connection to redemption. It told of an ancient pact between the town's founders and a malevolent entity from the depths of the sea. And it spoke of a terrible price that had been paid, one that still hung over the town like a specter. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read on, the words seeming to sear themselves into my brain. What had the founders of Redemption done? And what was the true nature of the walrus? I knew that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than myself, something that could change the course of history forever. But I also knew that I wasn't alone. There were others out there who would stop at nothing to claim this knowledge for themselves. I had to be careful, had to protect myself and my research from those who would seek to use it for their own gain. I sat in the dark library, surrounded by the shadows and the silence, feeling like a tiny pawn in a much larger game. But I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what lay ahead. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled into something much bigger than myself. The ancient knowledge contained within the dark library's walls was like a siren's call, beckoning me to explore its secrets further. I knew it was a risk, but I couldn't resist the allure of forbidden knowledge. I began to experiment with the ancient texts, poring over their cryptic language and symbolism. At first, the results were subtle, barely perceptible changes in my perception of the world. But as I delved deeper, the effects grew stronger, like ripples spreading across a still pond. I started to see things that weren't there, shadows darting around the edges of my vision. I heard whispers in the wind, faint but insistent voices that seemed to carry on the breeze. The town itself began to feel different, as if it was shifting and flowing like a liquid. The buildings seemed to lean in closer, their walls whispering secrets in my ear. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't help myself. I was addicted to the rush of discovery, the thrill of uncovering hidden truths. And so I continued to experiment, pouring more and more into the ancient knowledge. I felt like a mad scientist, cackling maniacally as I watched the world around me begin to unravel. I began to notice strange side effects, however. My dreams grew darker and more vivid, filled with twisted visions of the sea and its inhabitants. I started to feel an intense connection to the water, as if it was calling to me from beneath the surface. And then there were the visions, fleeting glimpses of a world that wasn't my own, a world where the walrus ruled supreme. I knew I had to be careful, but I couldn't resist the pull of the forbidden knowledge. It was like a moth to a flame, drawing me in with promises of power and revelation. And so I continued to experiment, fueled by my insatiable curiosity. But at what cost? I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss below. The ancient knowledge was like a double-edged sword, promising me answers but also threatening to cut me down in its wake. I knew I had to be careful, but I couldn't help myself. I was addicted to the rush of discovery, and I would stop at nothing to uncover the secrets of the dark library. I had been searching for any information about the coven, but it was like they didn't exist. I knew they were real, though, the whispers in the wind, the shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. They were a secret society, one that operated in the shadows and preyed on the vulnerable. And now, I had decided to infiltrate them. I dressed in dark clothing, trying to blend in with the locals. The coven was said to be made up of people who had been consumed by the walrus's curse, their bodies twisted and distorted by its influence. I knew that if I wanted to survive, I would have to adopt some of their mannerisms, their rituals. I walked through the streets, trying to get a feel for where the coven was hiding. The air was thick with an eerie energy, like the weight of secrets pressed down upon me. I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows, and my skin crawled with unease. I found a small church on the outskirts of town, its doors hanging crookedly on hinges that seemed to be held together by sheer force of will. This was it. This was where the coven met. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, stepping into a world that was both familiar and yet utterly alien. I looked around, trying to take in everything at once. The room was dimly lit, with candles flickering like fireflies in the darkness. There were maybe 24 people there, all of them twisted and distorted by some unseen force. They seemed to be waiting for something, their eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. I took a seat, trying to blend in. The coven's leader, a woman with eyes that seemed to burn with an inner fire, approached me. She was tall and gaunt, her skin stretched taut over her cheekbones like parchment. As I delved deeper into the ancient knowledge, I began to feel a change within myself. My mind expanded, my senses grew sharper, and my connection to the sea deepened. But with each new power I unlocked, I felt a corresponding darkness spreading through me. It was as if the very essence of the walrus's curse was awakening within me, threatening to consume me whole. I tried to resist its pull, but it was like trying to hold back a tide. The power coursed through my veins, intoxicating and seductive. I felt myself becoming one with the sea, my thoughts merging with those of the creatures that dwelled within it. I began to see visions of the past and present, fragments of memories that weren't my own. I saw the coven's leader, her eyes burning with an inner fire, and I knew that she was not what she seemed. She was a puppeteer manipulating strings from behind the scenes, pulling the marionettes of redemption towards their doom. I realized that the power I had unleashed within me came with a terrible price. With each new discovery, I felt my sense of self slipping away, consumed by the madness that lurked beneath the surface of the sea. I was no longer sure what was real and what was just a product of my fevered imagination. I looked around at the twisted faces of the coven, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. They were the creatures of the deep, born from the darkness that lurked within every human heart, and I knew that I had become one of them, forever bound to the sea and its secrets. I was no longer sure if I was still in control or if the power had taken over. The line between reality and madness had blurred, and I could no longer trust my own thoughts. The price of power was higher than I had ever imagined, and I wondered if it would be too late to turn back before it was too late. I stared at my hands, and they seemed to belong to someone else. The fingers were long and spindly, the nails yellowed with age. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it only grew stronger. Every word I spoke felt like a lie, every thought a distant memory. Reality began to unravel before my eyes, threads snapping apart like a tapestry torn by a razor. I saw fragments of my past life, snapshots of childhood memories, fragments of conversations with loved ones, echoes of laughter and tears. But they were all distorted, like reflections in a funhouse mirror. I couldn't quite grasp what was real and what wasn't. I felt a presence beside me, the coven's leader watching me with an unblinking gaze. Her eyes burned with an inner fire, but I saw something else there too, a glimmer of recognition, a hint that she knew me better than I knew myself. I tried to speak, but my voice was barely a whisper. The words tumbled out incoherently, like a child's first attempts at language. I felt my grip on sanity faltering, the line between past and present blurring into a maddening vortex. I saw visions of the sea, its depth stretching down into the darkness. I heard the whispers of the dead, their voices carried on the currents of the ocean. The world around me melted away, leaving only the endless blue horizon. I was no longer sure if I was still human, or if I had become something else entirely. The madness crept in, a slow-moving tide that threatened to consume me whole. And yet I couldn't help but feel drawn to its power like a moth to a flame. I knew then that I was lost, forever trapped in this labyrinth of my own mind. The only way out was to surrender to the madness, to let it take me where it would. And so I closed my eyes and let the darkness envelop me, the sea's secrets whispering sweet nothings in my ear. As I delved deeper into the mysteries of the walrus's curse, I found myself confronting the darkest corners of my own past. The memories that had been hidden away for so long began to surface, like bubbles rising to the surface of a stagnant pool. I was taken back to my childhood, to a summer spent at my grandparents' seaside cottage. It was an idyllic setting, with its sandy beach and rocky shores, but I remembered it as a place of darkness and fear. My grandmother had been a recluse, a woman consumed by the sea's power and its secrets. She would spend hours talking to me about the ocean, about its moods and its creatures, about the ancient magic that lay hidden beneath its surface. But there was something else in her eyes, something that made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, something that made me feel like I was staring into the abyss. And then, one summer's day, she took me to the rocky shore and showed me something that changed everything. It was an old, leather-bound book, bound with rusty clamps and adorned with strange symbols. She opened it, revealing pages filled with illustrations of sea creatures and ancient rituals. She told me that this was a book of the Walrus's curse, that it held the secrets of his power and his magic. And she told me that I was connected to him, that our bloodlines were tied together in ways I couldn't begin to understand. I felt like my world had been turned upside down. The memories came flooding back, memories of my grandmother's strange behavior, of her obsession with the sea and its secrets. And I realized that it was all connected, that everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. The Walrus's curse wasn't just a myth, it was real, and I was a part of it. I felt like I was drowning in the depths of my own past, like I was being pulled under by an undertow of secrets and lies. But I knew that I had to keep swimming, to keep pushing forward no matter what lay ahead. For if I didn't, I would be lost forever, trapped in a world of my own making. As I delved deeper into the mysteries of the Walrus's curse, reality began to distort and blur around me. Time itself seemed to be unraveling, like a thread pulled from a tapestry. I felt myself becoming lost in a never-ending loop of terror, unable to escape the abyss that yawned before me. I saw fragments of memories, only to have them fade away like mist in the morning sun. I heard whispers in my ear, only to realize they were just the wind rustling through the reeds. The lines between past and present blurred, leaving me disoriented and lost. I was trapped in a maze of mirrors, with reflections staring back at me from every direction. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on me from the shadows. I stumbled through the darkness, trying to find my way out of the labyrinthine corridors of my own mind. But every door I opened led only to more questions, more terrors waiting in the wings. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of uncertainty, with no anchor to cling to. The Walrus's curse seemed to be closing in around me, suffocating me with its icy grip. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost in the void. I tried to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I was trapped, unable to escape the horror that haunted me. I saw visions of my grandmother, her eyes black as coal, her skin stretched taut over her skull like a drumhead. She beckoned to me, her bony fingers waving in the air, drawing me deeper into the abyss. I felt myself being pulled towards her, like a moth to the flame. I knew that if I followed her, there would be no turning back. The Walrus's curse would consume me whole, and I would be lost forever. The line between reality and madness had always been thin for me, but now it was about to be tested in ways I never could have imagined. As I delved deeper into the mysteries of the Walrus's curse, I felt myself being pulled down a rabbit hole of terror and confusion. The world around me began to distort and warp, like a funhouse mirror reflecting my deepest fears. Every step I took felt like a betrayal, as if I was abandoning all that was left of my sanity. My grip on reality was tenuous at best, and now it seemed like it was about to snap completely. I saw things that couldn't be explained, heard whispers in the wind that made no sense. The Walrus's influence was everywhere, seeping into every pore of my being like a cold, dark liquid. I felt myself becoming a puppet on strings, with some unseen force pulling me towards the edge of madness. My thoughts were a jumbled mess of fear and confusion, with no clear direction or purpose. I was lost in a sea of uncertainty, with no anchor to cling to. The Walrus's curse was closing in around me like a vice, squeezing the life out of me with every passing moment. I knew that if I didn't find a way to escape its influence, I would be consumed completely, my mind shattered by the horrors that lurked within. But for now, I was trapped, unable to escape the descent into madness. As I stood at the edge of the abyss, the walrus's curse closing in around me like a shroud, I knew that this was it. This was the end. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short gasps, and yet I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was as if I had finally accepted my fate, and in doing so, I had found a measure of peace. The world around me had grown dark and distorted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror, but I saw it clearly now. I saw the truth. The walrus's curse was not just a myth, but a reality that had been waiting for me all along. It had been waiting for me to confront my deepest fears, to face the darkness within myself. And now, as I stood on the precipice of madness, I knew that I had finally found what I had been searching for all along. The last breath was mine, and with it came a sense of closure, a sense of resolution. I let out a sigh, feeling my lungs expand one final time, and then I was still. My eyes closed and I waited for the darkness to consume me. But as I stood there, frozen in time, I realized that I had found something more precious than life itself. I had found understanding. The walrus's curse had taught me a valuable lesson, that sometimes it is necessary to confront the darkness within ourselves in order to find the light.